Hi everyone, Sam here, back with another episode of Azure Snippets. I've been away for a few weeks now at the MVP Summit and some other travel, but we're back now, and today we're going to talk about management groups. So management groups are a feature of Azure that were added about a year or so ago, and what they allow us to do is to group our Azure subscriptions and build a hierarchy of these subscriptions. So they're a really useful tool for people who have to manage multiple subscriptions, particularly in larger companies, and where you want to break those companies up into different groupings, but also be able to manage them more effectively. And we're going to see how that works. So the image here, this is from the management group documentation. You can see here there's a company that has built a hierarchy of different management groups encompassing different areas of the business, so HR, IT, marketing, so on, and then even subdivide them even further if you look underneath the IT section into production and then geographies. Management groups are really just buckets for your subscription, so you can build your hierarchy any way you want. It can be business units, it can be regions, it can be both, production, development, whatever you want to do, but it's a way of grouping those subscriptions that are like each other together. And the most important thing, it allows us to manage those subscriptions at a management group rather than having to deal with them at individual subscription levels. Okay, so management groups allow us to group those subscriptions, but what's the point? What does that allow us then to do? Well, what that means is that when they're in a management group, we can apply things to the management groups. And in particular, we can apply role-based access controls at the management group level. We can apply policies at the management group level, and we can apply blueprints. And not only that, but those things you apply flow down your hierarchy. So what it would allow us to do is, for example, as a company administrator, apply some policies and some role-based access control at the very top level in this root management group, and that will be applied to everyone underneath. And then we can allow the individual business units to apply their own policies and even put policies per region or per production and development. And management groups will allow us to define those at the appropriate level and have them flow down to the management groups and the subscriptions beneath them. Okay, so let's take a look at how this works. We're in the portal, and if we click on all services and go to management groups, and what we'll see is that there's no management groups because we haven't enabled using management groups in this tenant. Your management group hierarchy all sits underneath one Azure AD tenant. So if you go to a different tenant, you'll get a different hierarchy. So we need to enable this here. So we'll click on start using management groups. That's going to enable it. And then it's going to ask us to create a management group. So by default, when you enable it, you get the root management group, and that's always going to be called root or tenant root. It might be mentioned as different names, but root or tenant root is what that'll be called. You don't have any choice in that matter. And now it wants you to create a new management group to sit underneath that. So we're going to create one for our IT department. And so the ID needs to be lowercase, no spaces, and then we can put a more descriptive title in the name, and we'll go ahead and create that. And that's going to turn on management groups and create the first one for us. It can take a little while. This is 15 minutes there. It's usually quicker than that. And you see now we're ready to go. We're in the root management group now, and you can see here we've got our subscriptions underneath. And if we hit refresh, we should now see our IT department group there. And what I want to do then is create a couple of sub-departments. So what I want is a development group, and then we're also going to create a production group. And you can see now they've appeared now here. Now at the minute, there's no hierarchy here. Everything sits at the root level, so we need to organize our hierarchy. So we want the development and the production management groups to sit underneath the IT department. So if we click on the button down here and go to move, and we can say we want this to sit underneath the IT department. And the same for one, and the same for production. And you can see then they disappear because they're now underneath underneath the IT department section. Now at the minute, the subscriptions themselves are all still sat at the root level. So what we need to do is click on move to move them, and we're going to put the sponsorship one under production, and we're going to put the pay-as-you-go one underneath development. And now we've got our hierarchy set up so that if we click on the IT department, we can see the two levels underneath that, and if we click on production, we can see that's subscription. You can see here you've got these breadcrumbs at the top, so we can go back up a level and go look at development, and then hit refresh there, and then back up to the root group. Okay, so that's our hierarchy organised, our management groups created. Now we can start using them to actually apply permissions. Now the first thing I want to do is to grant my admins group ownership of all of the subscriptions. So we're going to do that at the root level, so that's applied to every department and every subscription. Now you'll notice here this warning here. You're registered as a director admin, but you don't have necessary permissions to access the root management group. So this is a security feature. So I can go and administrate the management groups underneath here, but if I want to apply something at root, I actually need to go and allow that and to elevate myself to do that. So the way we do that is we go into Azure Active Directory, and we go to Properties, and you can see that you've got this box down here for access management for Azure resources. This is off at the moment. I need to turn that on to be able to manage the root management group. The general advice for this is you turn it on when you need it and then you turn it off again, because it should be a fairly rare occurrence to apply things at the root. The general advice is to only apply things at the root that have to be applied to everybody. Otherwise, do it at some of the sub-management groups. So if we pop back to our management groups, and I want to apply my admin group permissions to this root group. Now there's no IAM or RBAC box here or anything. To actually get to that page, you need to click on this details button. It's not very obvious that you need to do this, but we can go ahead and do that. You can see here you've got the normal access control policies and so on. And so we'll go ahead and click access control and role assignments. And you can see here I'm applied here with the user access administrator. This is the right it gives me when I enabled that box to say I need that right. So we'll go ahead and click add. So I'm going to select the owner right, and I want to apply that just to my company admins group, and we'll click save, and that's going to apply that, and we should see that then added at the management group level. And if we then hop over and have a look at the subscriptions, what we should see is that that's now been applied down the chain and is now actually at the subscription level as well. Role assignments. You see here we've now got company admins applied, and you can see that's inherited from the management group. So we can then go and apply all the management roles we want at the appropriate level, be that management group, root, or subscription, and they will flow down the chain, making it much easier if you're having to manage lots of subscriptions and you want to apply rights on groups of subscriptions, then you can do that. Similarly, if we go back to our management groups, and we're now going to have a look at the IT department, and I want to apply a policy for the IT department. So we're going to go into policies, and let's go and assign an existing policy. So let's say we're gonna add a policy to audit any VMs that don't use managed disks. So if someone's deployed a VM that's using old school VHDs, then I will get an audit alert for that. So let's click that. We don't need to do anything else, so we can assign that. And that'll go and run through and give me a compliance report eventually. But that's now applied to every subscription underneath the management group. I didn't have to go and apply it to individual subscriptions. I just applied it to the management groups. Similarly, we can use blueprints, so we can create a blueprint and we can store that blueprint at the management group level. That means we're able to apply that blueprint to any subscription underneath that particular management group. rather than having to go and assign blueprints to individual subscriptions. So that's a pretty useful tool as well. So we can also look at cost analysis at the management group level. I think I've got any costs in this one, but we will be able to see costs for all of the subscriptions at this particular level. Yes, I don't have any actual resources in here, so that's why there's no costs. But you would be able to roll up your spend and filter that and so on at the management group level rather than individual subscriptions. And then the last option on here for budgets, it's not actually enabled yet, so it's coming soon. But eventually you are going to be able to set a budget at a management group level rather than an individual subscription level, so you can see how all the subscriptions underneath your management group add up and where they are on a global budget across that management group. So that's about all there is for management groups. It's a pretty useful tool. It's a pretty simple tool, but it's pretty useful if you need to apply policies, access control, and things like blueprints and cost analysis across a range of subscriptions rather than doing them at individual subscription levels and having to go and apply them to every single one manually. If you're running a large Azure estate, it's a pretty useful tool to be aware of and to make use of. So I hope that was useful for you, and I'll see you next time on Azure Snippets.